I'm going to give it just a second to see if anyone else needs to join in before I fully begin, but we'll get started with the introductions and everything once we feel like maybe everyone who's showing up has showed up. All right, looks like we're holding pretty steady at 12 now. So let's just go ahead and get started with the webinar and introductions. So good afternoon. Welcome to the Community Outreach Ad Hoc Committee's public forum on the Mayor's proposed budget for Oakland Police Department and the Police Commission. We're looking forward to hearing for your insights and answering any questions from the community. We'd like to post a record. We will post a recording today of the forums of this forum on our website and save all comments from the Zoom chat for future reference. Please email any additional feedback you have for us to opc@oaklandcommission.org. So let's go ahead and begin with a round of introductions. I'll start us off. My name is David Jordan. I am the vice chair of the commission, though not chair of this actual ad hoc. I have been with the commission for almost 4 years now, and I took part in this because I do sort of some similar public policy work in San Francisco for San Francisco Public Health. And but I live in Oakland, and I've been doing that sort of policy involved work for more than a decade now. And I feel like I do a lot of work for a community that I don't live in, and it was really important to sort of give back to the community that I actually belong to, as well as, you know, I've had some experiences with criminal justice involvement as a youth, and it's sort of, it's an important, it is a issue that is important to me and that I am sort of personally passionate about. Coralie?
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for spending an hour or more with us on this beautiful Saturday. My name is Kareli Ordaz, and I am an alternate commissioner appointed last summer. I've been on this body formally for 10 months, although it feels like much longer. And the reason why I do this work is because I am from Oakland. I grew up in East and Deep East Oakland, and I believe I bring a valuable perspective to the work. And above all, I'm committed to the success of the town. So I'm here, and I'm looking forward to being here for the next few months. And I'm going to pass it on to Kelly.
Thank you. My name is Kelly Yoon. I'm the interim chief of staff of the Police Commission, and I began in my role in August of 2022. I personally have experience with members of my family in the criminal justice system and care deeply about social justice in public safety and police reform. And I have been really privileged to work alongside leaders in our community, such as our commissioners and colleagues in the city. So I look forward to continuing in this work together. And I will pass it on to Intern Chief Al.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Darren Allison. I'm the interim police chief for the Oakland Police Department. I started with the city of Oakland and the police department in 1994. So I'm coming up in my 29th year with the city. Served in every capacity within the organization, from patrol to community policing, special operations, criminal investigations, inspector general's office, internal affairs, and served at pretty much every rank throughout the cities or throughout the department. So definitely happy to be here today on this beautiful Saturday afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Interim Chief, for that introduction and for everyone else here. We are waiting for one member of the ad hoc who will hopefully join us before the meeting ends. And I just want to walk through the agenda a little bit for those of you that are here joining us. So we did a welcome and introductions. Then we're going to spend some time hearing from Interim Chief Allison on the OPD budget. The presentation should last around 10 to 15 minutes. Then we're going to open it up for Q&A. Please raise your hand when you're ready for that, and Kelly will call on you. Then we're going to hear from Kelly around the Police Commission budget, and again, hold some Q&A, and then leave space for any next steps and closing remarks. So without further ado, I will go ahead and pass it to Interim Chief Allison.
All right, thank you very much. And Kelly, I will share my screen for the PowerPoint here. Just give me 1 second. Okay, can everyone see my screen? All right. So this presentation is the same presentation that I provided to City Council last Tuesday when we covered the OPD budget, and in that space, in that study session, all department heads provided their proposed budget, their reductions and impacts. All right. So just to kind of frame, give some foundational approaches to the department and how we're structured as fundamental approach to policing. So we are divided up into 6 geographic areas that include 35 police beats. So those, when we talk about police beat, each beat is staffed with a patrol officer, and they're responsible for 911 response. And we run patrol 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We can see up to anywhere from 10 to 20% vacancies on a day-to-day basis for various authorized leaves like vacation, sick leave, training, comp time, which is accrued leave. So we have to, we don't ever staff to a bare minimum of 35 per shift. But we try and fill a little bit over to compensate for various leaves to try and minimize any kind of what we call backfill patrol beats or backfill 911 response teams or officers. But with that said, we do run 35 beats per shift. We run 3 shifts a day. They'll be referred to as first watch, second watch, or third watch. Sometimes they'll be referred to as days, swings, and nights. And they run on good days off, which are usually Friday, Saturday, Sundays, or Saturday, Sunday, Mondays. And then we have a shift that works the weekends with weekdays off, sometimes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It depends on how the overlap is configured on a given week and a given shift. But with that said, when you look at command personnel, supervisors, admin support staff, and patrol response officers, it takes roughly 378 to 79 sworn personnel to have patrol function, to have beats cover, to be able to respond to 911 and provide the needed supervision in the field. 379 officers accounts for roughly 51% of the sworn staff in the police department. We are structured for 803, and I'll use different terms intentionally, but structured for 803. But last fiscal budget for 21-23, we had a series of sworn positions frozen, which brought us down to a lower number. Originally, it was around 705, but it grew over time as the budget proceeded into the year 2023, and we're currently funded at 741. So what that means is, on top of when you look at the 803 structured positions, after we're frozen 52 positions. Currently, we're actually funded at 741. What my goals were in talking with the mayor and the administration was to try and maintain as best we could patrol response for those emergency situations when community needs police officer response for serious and violent crime, as well as maintain a level of criminal investigation support. So our 2 biggest divisions, if you will, that really absorb most of our police personnel or sworn personnel, is going to be patrol and criminal investigations. So with that, what the summary of the reductions are, in addition, and this is in addition to the 62 sworn positions that were frozen from the previous fiscal year, coming up for the 23-25 budget, there is a proposal to freeze an additional 31 sworn positions. So that'll be a total of 93. So 62 carried over plus the additional 31. That will move our baseline from 803 to 710. In 1 second after I go through the reductions, I'll go back to the sworn and the professional staff, and I'll talk about what specific functions will be impacted by those reductions. In addition to the 93 overall frozen sworn positions, there'll be an additional that says 14 professional staffs that were frozen from the previous fiscal cycle. It's actually 15. Those numbers are off. It was 15 from the 21-23 budget that'll be carried forward into 23-25, plus an additional 4. So it's still, the total is the same for 19. It'll take us from 351.5 professional staff positions to 332.5 professional staff positions for our baseline non-sworn personnel. Another area of reduction will be on overtime. There'll be a 15% department-wide overtime reduction. The way overtime works, overtime doesn't typically fund a particular initiative. It is a bucket of overtime, and we use historical data on what our expend rates are for overtime. It can include anything from running sideshow enforcement to conducting administrative investigations that are required by not only our policies, but federal oversight. Also backfill, as I mentioned earlier, into patrol and other extensions, critical incidents, so on and so forth. So our overall overtime budget would be reduced by 15%, which is roughly around $6 million or so dollars. We'll also reduce our academies from 8 to 5, and what you'll see in the later slides is you'll actually see 6 academies listed there, 3 per year of the 2-year budget. Why there's that difference is there's an academy that was funded in this budget cycle that's scheduled to start in a week. Those monies are going to be carried forward into the new budget. So it says 5 that are being funded. That is true. Those are being funded by the new budget. But you'll see 6 because the 192nd that schedule starts going to be carried forward. So there'll be actually a total of 6 that graduate in the next 2-year budget. And then finally, there'll be a reduction in our vehicle replacement and maintenance costs from 11 million to 5 million. That really impacts our fleet. So obviously we run patrol vehicles as part of our 911 response and our patrol response and all our other functional units. The money that we use for the vehicle replacement baseline not only allows us to purchase new replacement vehicles, but maintain a service level of these vehicles. Our vehicles, they do go through a lot of maintenance because they are run pretty much every single day on all the time. And so they do accumulate high miles and wear and tear on the vehicles for how much we use our cars. So going back to the summary of reductions at the top, the sworn positions, and I'll focus on the 31 since those are new sworn positions that will be frozen. They will be coming out of our homeless outreach team, which currently has 2 officers. So that'll take them out completely, and we'll have no officers assigned to homeless outreach. 1 intel officer, reducing that team to, I believe it's 5. 5 from CID, but that's criminal investigations. Those 5 would be 2 from our youth outreach program, which makes up PAL and ART kids, and 3 from general crimes. So that's the total of 5 from criminal investigations, 11 from community resources, leaving 16 for the city, and then 8 motor officers, which are traffic enforcement officers, the officers that are on motorcycles. That would eliminate our traffic enforcement team, and then 4 traffic investigators and vehicle abatement officers. So as everyone is aware, I'm sure that abandoned auto and scofflaw details were taken over by Department of Transportation. But what remained in the police department was vehicle abatement, which are vehicles that are on private property. And they could include stolen vehicles, hit and run vehicles, abandoned vehicles. That was left with the police department just because of the private property nature of it. So we do have some staff that were assigned there that would take our staff down to, I believe, 1 officer in the abatement side of traffic. For professional staff, the additional 4 positions, 2 would be from our crime analysts. They do the data work around crime statistics. 1 police services technician, which would leave us, I think, at about 38 or 39 service technicians. They are professional staff report response team. So they don't do evidence collections. They're different than police evidence technicians. The service technicians can actually take reports in the field, tow cars, as well as conduct traffic control. So we'll still have a decent cadre in patrol out there to serve the public, but we would freeze one PSD. And then finally, one police communications dispatcher senior. That is a position that is between supervisor and entry-level dispatcher. We can't fill the senior positions. There's 5 total. We can't fill them until we're fully staffed. And we do have 15 vacancies, not including our overhires for the entry-level police communications dispatcher. So by the time we fill those positions with attrition and running academies, it would be quite some time before we'd be able to fill the senior position. So there'd be nominal impact when it would come to freezing that single senior dispatch position. So overall, our new service impacts that would occur with a additional 31 sworn and additional 4 professional staff freezes would include open community resource positions and uncovered community policing beats. We have, as I mentioned earlier, 35 beats. Each one should have a community resource officer on them to engage with our neighborhood councils. The reduction from that's not only carried over from the previous budget cycle, but the proposed additional freezes would leave us with 16. So they would have to cover multiple beats. We could probably also fill in some of the openings through utilization of our foot patrol officers, which are going to maintain at 15. And so there could be an overlapping coverage between the community resource officers and foot patrol officers. So there's at least a point of contact from the community to a designated police officer for an area. The reduced overtime would have, again, as I mentioned, a variant areas of reductions because there is not allotted overtime to specific initiatives. It's kind of where the crime trends are going and where the need is when it comes to overtime. We'd anticipate reduction in our ability to do crime prevention enforcement, which would include robbery suppression, burglary suppression, some of our human trafficking operations, and investigative support operations. Obviously, the complete elimination of our motorcycle team, our enforcement team, could affect enforcement or dangerous driving in the high injury networks. We would still have access to overtime. We do run grants from the state that allow us to conduct dangerous driving operations. So although we would not have a budgeted team, we would still have motorcycle trained officers that could pull from grants to conduct specialized overtime operations funded through those grants. The reduction of abatement and investigations will reduce our ability to investigate traffic collisions and vehicle enforcement capacity. We do have a lot of, I hate to say it, injury accidents, fatal accidents. And so that would obviously put a lot of work on top of the reduced staff that's there. The city of Oakland does see a lot of collisions throughout the year. We'd have a reduction in our kids program. So again, our kids program is our mentorship program for our officers to junior high and high school young people throughout the city. And so it would just, again, it would create greater volume for individualized staff to absorb the extra work from their frozen positions. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, a reduction in general crimes. And what general crimes encompasses is when you think of our crime sections, we have robbery, we have homicide, we have felony assault, burglary, and then there are certainly other crimes that don't fit in those categories that fall into the general crimes category, to include fraud investigations, weapons charging, narcotics charging, stolen vehicles, those other crimes that don't necessarily fit in the overarching high level criminal investigative categories. I also wanted to include continued service impacts. So these are service impacts that are experienced right now in this budget period, but they were experienced beginning in 2021 and through the last 2 years in the previous budget period, just for full transparency of where these impacts will continue into the next 2 years. The first freezes, the 62 that I mentioned earlier, had a heavy impact to criminal investigations. I think a total of 24, I believe, were positions were frozen that were allotted to CID. Again, most of them came from field support teams, some from general crimes, but there were 1 or 2 positions that came from robbery, felony assault, a couple from homicide, a couple from burglary. So those would continue into the next 2 years. Um, Along those lines, our child exploitation unit was also reduced by a couple positions, so that would continue to have impacts. We saw reductions in our Violent Crimes Operations Center, which houses our crime reduction team officers. They were reduced by, I believe, 10 last budget cycle. That would continue into the new period. We have a couple positions that were frozen in air support, so the helicopter or air support availability would be reduced. The bulk of the professional staff freezes from the previous budget cycle fell to the fiscal services division. So fiscal service processing within the police department will have a continued impact. And some of the work from those professional staff freezes would shift to other professional staff, causing obviously additional workload. And then we also had one position in the alcohol beverage action team that was frozen that will continue into the next fiscal year. These are the dates for the upcoming academies, and these are just projected. They can certainly adjust as needed due to recruitment or academy certifications. But this is just a general kind of idea of what we'd see over the next 2 years with the graduation of police academies. We'd have authorization to fill 33 in each academy. We're close to that for the 192nd that's being carried forward into the next fiscal year. They're going to start on June 10th with the anticipated graduation date of December. And then we'd have some overlap, and we can push back or pull forward depending on where our authorized strength is. And just to kind of give an idea, when we say that our authorized sworn strength is 710, it is a fiscal year average. So there'll be some months that might go up, some months that might come down, as long as the average stays at 710 for the funding for the year. That's what our goal is. So we have the ability to space out these academies and adjust them to make sure that we maintain the fiscal year average. And I think I covered as much as I could, and we'll certainly be open for questions, and we can get into a little bit more details or talk about some of the other issues or concerns in the presentation.
Thank you so much, Chief. I will go ahead and share my screen. And before we do, I just want to note that Commissioner Howell has joined us and give him the opportunity to introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming today. Sorry for being tardy. I had to work this morning. Yep. So we're here to knock this out. I am the chair of the outreach committee, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. And it looks like we have one hand from Elise Bernstein and a question from Brad. And so I'll start with Ms. Bernstein and put 2 minutes on the clock whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. I actually have questions about the police commission budget, not the OPD. So can you put me down the list?
Sure,
Can
absolutely.
we discuss that? Thank you.
Then I will move on to a question from Brad, just going in the order hands are raised, and then I'll go back to phone number ending 1779. So Chief, if you might offer some insights on Brad's question. He asked, given the increase in crime since the COVID pandemic, I'm surprised to see such cuts to the OPD. What is the reason for such cuts when more funding is needed? How can the OPD funding be given higher priority?
All right, thank you for that question. So I will say, and I know the Brad Johnson from the budget office isn't here with us, but some that he obviously made a point to indicate during the council presentation is the city is faced with a pretty significant budget shortfall, somewhere in the tune of $300 million. And so every department was asked to come with some type of cuts and freezes. I know we had been sustaining freezes, the 62, as I mentioned earlier, over the last 2 years, and we were able to focus and prioritize violent crime. When we were asked to make additional freezes to get to a certain reduction, the goal was to try and focus on positions that weren't going to have a huge impact to not only 911 response, but follow up on violent crime. So we did leave intact our ceasefire teams, We did not touch, as another round of freezes, any of our violent crime investigative bodies. So homicide, felony assault, robbery. We did not go further cuts into our violent crimes operations center teams. So our goal as we move forward, even with these reductions, would again to use intel-led policing, to use our officers in the most efficient way possible, to focus on the individuals that are at greatest likelihood of being involved in gun violence, robberies, and have a very focused approach. Just recently, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we saw a really increased spike in armed robberies throughout the city. I believe 1 week we experienced 100, and through that intelligence-led model, leaning on our ceasefire and violent crime operations teams, we were able to make several arrests in a very short period of time and watch the number of robberies quickly reduce. So I think that's going to be our efforts, is to use the limited available resources that we have within our department as focused and as intentional as possible, as well as leaning on our other justice system partners. We do have connections and relationships and participation in various task force with our county and federal partners, as well as good collaboration with other law enforcement agencies that operate within the city of Oakland, including BART, the Housing Authority, the Sheriff's Department, and we're in really good collaboration with the San Francisco Police Department. We see cross-bay crimes occurring, and so we're going to have to rely on those collaborations as we go into this next 2-year cycle.
Thank you so much. And I will move on to a question from phone number ending 1779, whenever you're ready.
Yes, this is Mary Vale. I'm a resident of the Glenview, which until recently was in Council District 5, now Council District 4. And I'm on the board for our neighborhood association and our Beat 16Y. We discovered our beat and some of the neighboring ones in the Diamond for some time, like going back maybe to 2021. Instead of having a part-time neighborhood services coordinator and a part-time CRO, beat officer, we haven't had a beat officer. We have an emergency contact for CRO for big issues for well over a year. And we heard that when we talked to the department about, being totally zeroed out in terms of community policing staff, civilian and officer wise, that there was a hope that some positions could be filled. And again, we only need a part-time person, and we only relate to them in terms of chronic and repeated safety crime issues. So what does this budget say in terms of the staffing core for the CROs in Oakland, and whether you'll prioritize the beats that have no one? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. And so you're absolutely right as far as some of the vacancies that were experienced with our CROs. So there was, if you remember, back in the last budget cycle, they were actually frozen CRO positions. I believe there were 8 officers and I believe 2 sergeants for an equivalent of 10 positions that were frozen in the last budget cycle. There'll be an additional 11 that will be frozen at the next 2-year budget. But what will remain is 16. And to your point, as far as deployment, there will be some overlapping coverage, but where we're going to prioritize will certainly be the areas that are experiencing the most crime, most violence, most blight concerns in the areas. And so it'll be data driven as to where we have a placement on those officers. We have an additional 15 foot patrol officers that have a portion of their funding provided by a COPS grant that was approved, I believe, last budget cycle. And what I'm going to attempt to do is put the foot patrol officers, certainly they'll be in the neighborhood shopping districts and the bids, but in those beats, account for those foot patrol officers as liaisons to the community, and then wrap the CROs into beats that have high crime, high community concerns, high violence, that may not have a foot patrol officer, so we can get wider coverage. We'll have foot patrol in the beats with the business districts, we'll have CROs in the beats that have violence and crime. And between the 16 foot patrol officers and the 15 foot patrol officers and the 16 CROs, That would give us roughly 31 areas that we can lock into with having some officer liaison for community, which would leave us short about 4. And that's the best way we can make the most efficient use, knowing that we'll have a reduced CRO team, but we want to maximize our citywide coverage.
Thank you, Chief. And I'm going to sort of combine our next 2 questions that are around traffic safety. And so part 1 of the question is that traffic enforcement is tremendous safety issue in the city, especially in East Oakland. And is there a way to shift some funds to keep a dedicated traffic team, even if OPD must request state traffic officers to assist? And kind of part 2 of that, we have a question around how many highway patrol and county sheriff's department officers are on duty in Oakland, and whether that number has shifted given the current crime wave.
Thank you for those questions. So as far as shifting money and resources, when we get funded for positions, say 710, I do have some discretion unless council has very specific wording in the budget that supports certain functions or initiatives. I do have discretion how I move officers around, but it does come at an impact. So shifting funding, say from one function to traffic, would mean reduced service in another area. And when we look at the structure of the organization, there's some areas that are difficult to move positions out of. So for example, patrol, if I move patrol officers and move them into a traffic funded position, then it impacts 911 response, and then it requires open beats or creates open beats which require more overtime. And so trying to balance a shifting of resources while maintaining a reduced overtime budget becomes a challenge. With that said, I do have, as I mentioned earlier, access to very focused traffic enforcement grants that can allow us to run operations within the city. And that those operations oftentimes are in collaboration with other partners, to include the 2 that were mentioned, Alameda County Sheriff's as well as California Highway Patrol. I don't have the numbers that are operating. I have their responsibilities. Obviously, there is a CHP office on Telegraph that runs their specific section in the immediate East Bay area. They do have responsibility on the 880, 580, 980, 24 corridors. So they do focus their patrols in those areas. But if we do need to run collaborative operations, they have been a very willing participant in running those operations. Similarly, the Sheriff's Department runs various different functions within the city of Oakland. One of them includes the Alameda County Narcotics Task Force. That's an Alameda County region-wide, but we do have a task force officer assigned, so they do operations within the city of Oakland. They also have staff at the airport. They have staff that patrols their AC Transit buses. So you could see sheriffs patrolling international, particularly around the bus lanes. But when it comes to joint collaborative traffic operations, we do have the ability to run those grant-funded operations. In fact, we're talking with the sheriff to run operations around Hegenberger, since it's the entryway into the airport, and there's some shared concerns with crime in that corridor that they're willing to assist with through some of those operations. With that said, I'm always looking to see where I can make adjustments. I do have the ability to loan personnel throughout the organization. And so if I do see maybe positions that are funded in one initiative, whether it's ceasefire or CID, that maybe don't have a high volume of workload and are maybe clearing cases really well, where I can shift funded positions from those initiatives into traffic, I could always loan for durations more positions into traffic enforcement to try and address spikes in activity, whether it's dangerous driving or whether it's more needed investigations. So I do have some discretion, but when we talk about moving positions under a finite 710 number of staff, we always pull away from one, which impacts work and expectations out of other parts of the police department. Again, CID, patrol, ceasefire, and the like.
Thank you. And would you happen to know how many police academy students can be typically turned into full-time field officers?
So we try and seat at least 33 recruits or trainees in an academy. Though that number ebbs and flows depending on the number of not only interesting candidates that we recruit, but the number that are eligible through passing a very rigorous selection process, including background checks, polygraphs, psychological evaluations, medical evaluations. So if we can seat 33, that is our goal. We do see attrition out of the academies. We have some individuals that voluntarily quit because maybe it doesn't fit what they envisioned a person would do in policing. Sometimes they fail out. We do have, we are post certified, so we do have to follow the post standards as far as passing tests and their ability to remediate. If we do have somebody that fails out though, and they're interested in sticking with it, we can actually cycle them into the next academy so we don't lose the individual who's interested in being an Oakland police officer. But we seat 33, we try and graduate 33. If we can graduate all 33, they go through a field training program. And if they successfully complete the field training program, conceivably, if all 33 were to do that, they would then go right into field work, into patrol. And what ends up happening is when we funnel new police officers into patrol, that's where they start. We can then pull some seasoned officers or senior officers who are interested in going to other parts of the department, like CID, ceasefire, traffic. We can then transfer them to offset and balance out any vacancies. One thing I didn't mention in my earlier presentation, and when I talked about 710 authorized strength, the department at any given time can run anywhere from 35 to 45, in some cases, as we sit here today, 50 long-term vacancies or leaves, not because of just position vacancies, because we just don't have the staff here, but on top of that, individuals who are out on long-term medical leave, admin leave, military leave, where they can be gone for many months, in some cases a year. We can see up to about 50 people that are out, which on top of any normal vacancies we have can create additional positional vacancies. And a lot of those impacts are burdened by all these other units, CID, patrol, so on and so forth. So I want to throw that out there, because when we move officers around to fill openings, it's not just to fill, actual vacancies, but it's to fill seats where people are out also on long-term leave.
Thank you. And it looks like we are kind of right at time. We have two other comments from members of the public that I will take. Reverend Jenkins, whenever you're ready.
Yes, I work with custom I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I work with custom notifications and ceasefire, and I just want to be sure that any budget reductions or budget falls that you may have, it will seriously affect our ability to reduce gun violence in the city of Oakland. I just want to express my concern not to have any type of budget decrease for ceasefire, which not sure, I believe it's under the Department of Violence Prevention. But we also need more funding to help us stop the pandemic of gun violence in our city. And I just want to be sure, or want to ask if you will not say guarantee, but look forward in helping us sustain this budget and try to increase it. That's all.
Thank you.
And Kelly, if I may just to provide some information around that, and I think it's a very good point. As I mentioned, using our limited resource in a very effective and smart manner is going to be important in this moment. And prioritizing violent crime and using intel-led policing and using strategies that have been very effective historically within the city of Oakland is going to be more important than ever. And so when it comes to ceasefire, we have for the last several years, been funded at 32 officers to include, not to include our captain or ceasefire director and our supervisors that are assigned. And although all 32 positions are not filled because of the reasons that I mentioned earlier with staff vacancies, the funding for the 32 positions are still in existence. We didn't touch ceasefire, we left it whole, and the funded positions are going to be the same as they were the previous several years.
Commissioner Ordaz?
May I ask just a clarifying question around ceasefire? You mentioned there were 32 positions and some are vacant. How many are vacant?
The last check I had, we had 8 vacant positions. So a full squad of ceasefire officers were unfilled in ceasefire.
Thank you. And our final comment is from Catherine N.
Good afternoon, folks. Oh, good, you can see my profile image. Okay. The cuts that have been brought to the council, I'm curious if they have already been accepted. And if not, kind of what does normally happen? Do they accept them? Or is there normally just or is there a process? That's my first question. And I do have one other quick question, which is the analysts that have been frozen, wondering if and how much of an impact those analysts being vacant have to consent decree work. And I can take my answers offline.
So if you like, I can quickly answer those 2 questions. The council has a budget team that is reviewing the mayor's budget. And I don't work for the finance office, so I don't know all the intricacies of everything that goes on, but they're going to have proposals from the council. They may have some amendments, but certainly they will have the mayor's budget. And then with the amendments in the mayor's budget, it'll eventually go to a council vote. So all the proposals haven't been set in stone. They haven't been voted on and adopted. There's still a process, but I know they have a window of time where it has to be adopted either before or by July 1st. So these are all proposed, and there could certainly be some minor modifications. And it's not just for the police department budget, but for all the department budgets throughout the city of Oakland. As far as the analysts, they're actually crime analysts, so they really focus on crime data, our UCR reporting to the federal government, to the FBI. We've had openings in our crime analysts. We have 5 right now, but we've had openings for quite some time. We'll continue to have a crime analyst assigned to ceasefire, as well as our crime analyst assigned to our criminal investigations division. But as far as negotiate settlement agreement impact or compliance impact or even risk management impact, it's not going to have an impact. We still have our funded positions in existence for our Office of Internal Accountability, as well as our Internal Affairs Division. And all the analysts that are there doing that work, they're not considered crime analysts. They're a different classification, and those positions they're going to maintain.
Thank you, Chief. And I will just add on that if any members of the public feel so inclined, they may decide to share feedback with City Council directly. And I know they have a meeting on the 6th. And there is a tentative meeting set for the 14th where the council president will be proposing her amendments. I encourage folks who want to get involved to attend those meetings. And with that, thank you so much, Chief. Oh, you're on mute.
I just wanted to thank everyone and have a great day and enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Alrighty, so I will go ahead and continue with the Police Commission budget. And for those who've been following and attending Police Commission meetings, some of this will sound familiar. And to start, I will provide a brief timeline of the budget discussions that have been happening over the past year. In 2022, I started in August, and there had been ongoing conversations around staffing needs and gaps in resources that would ultimately maximize our operations and kind of move the needle from compliance and meeting mandates to really proactively seeking out culture change and police reform. And so this was also a topic of discussion at the November 5th annual retreat that took place. And we continued to solicit feedback from commissioners in written form and at meetings January 21st and 26th. The budget ad hoc met in February and shared a preliminary proposal with the commission on February 23rd. And I highlight the word preliminary because it explicitly stated to the mayor that a final budget proposal would be pending a vote by the full commission, which took place March 30th during our special meeting. And finally, resources for the police chief search were approved by the city, and Mayor Tao released her One Oakland fiscal year proposal in May. And finally, we are continuing to solicit feedback here today and moving forward. So with that, I will move on to police commission role and responsibilities. It's difficult to talk about the budget without talking about what we're responsible for doing. And so at the core of the commission's mission is to oversee and reform policing in Oakland, to steward public safety and instill confidence in a just legal system. And they carry out this mission through police oversight in collaboration and partnership with the CPRA and Office of the Inspector General, police reform through policy, culture change, and community engagement, charter and municipal mandates as determined by the voters of Oakland, and the negotiated settlement agreement. Again, compliance, sustainability, and a transition that would hopefully lead towards proactive change. And so looking at what defines success based on the commission's responsibilities and duties, fulfilling the mandates of the charter and municipal code, looking at the impact of policies reviewed and approved, addressing racial disparities in policing practices, mitigating police misconduct, making sure the negotiated settlement agreement tasks are in compliance and we are in sustainability, compliance with city auditor's report, holding public forums and community engagement opportunities like this, and staff recruitment, management, retention, and performance evaluation. So this is something that is added from previous presentations, but I thought it would be helpful to provide insight on some of the staff responsibilities. And in terms of leadership duties, there is interdepartmental and legislative liaising, stakeholder relations, strategic planning and development, staff oversight and management. Administrative duties include managing the budget and other fiscal activities, contracts, human resources, personnel, communications, records, and systems of record keeping, calendar and meeting management, programmatic support, research and analysis, ad hoc committee support. There are currently 13 active ad hoc committees, assisting in meeting facilitation, drafting policy, reports, and letters. For project management, there would be long-range planning, implementation, and monitoring of all commission projects and activity with stakeholder engagement, public forums, community events, benchmarking, and collaboration with shared interest groups. Some of the research and analysis that went into our budget proposal included conversations with the independent monitoring team to really think about the makeup and organizational structure of what's needed in this transition over to taking on overseeing the work of the IMT. We also looked at Oakland Equity Indicator Report, the previous fiscal year service impact statements, a budget priority survey, which I will dive into in the next slide, along with other reliable sources in terms of kind of looking at what success, looking at what could lead to success in our operations. And so in the community survey I just mentioned, you'll notice that of all of the different priorities, police reform, reimagining public safety, was among the top. And as you can see, crime and violence is number one. And so this really reinforced how much of a priority public safety is to our community. And to look at our working totals from the previous fiscal year, or current, I should say, we had the police commission with $1 million in, just over $1 million in the budget, CPRA with about 4.5, the OIG with about 2.4, and that comprises a total of about 8 million. And while initially we had requested 3 full-time positions, we were not granted any additional full-time positions. So we had very difficult conversations around what are the gaps we are trying to fill, and is there a way we can do more with less by putting some of those responsibilities in our budgeted positions. And so with that, we have kind of modified the proposal to request a program analyst too. This is also, we are getting your feedback on all this and wanting to, before we submit any final recommendations, of course, but the idea is that looking at the gaps, a program analyst too would be the most appropriate to fill that need. And this was stemming from conversations with human resources and their recommendations as well. And so if you're asking yourself, why do we need another position and how would we afford that position given the the city's current budget deficit? Well, the commission severely lacks resources, and it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy if the commission is told they're not doing enough to move the needle in terms of reform, but are not given the resources to adequately do so. And so, you know, to me, it feels a little bit like giving someone paper and telling them to make a boat that floats when all we're asking for is a plank of wood. So also in terms of bridging this gap, looking at the mayor's community safety channel and her reorg of how the city administrator's office works, it's a brilliant idea to bring these public safety entities together and have more interdepartmental strategy, but that will require additional staff time. And it's an investment in ultimately breaking down silos and really having a coordinated effort in public safety. The city auditor's report recommended more staff resources. Community voices have reflected a need for engagement opportunities, which can be strengthened with additional staff. And in terms of the road ahead, an exit from the NSA will provide funding that would otherwise go to pay the independent monitoring team. And considering the dollars spent on misconduct cases, litigation, this is a long-term investment in staff that would be preventative. And so these are just some notes going back to the sources of our research and analysis. And with that, I will take questions. Ms. Bernstein had her hand up first, so I will go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hello again, Elise Bernstein. My comments are that I don't think the police commission itself requires more staff, although staff is doing a wonderful job. And that's partly because the need is so great for the CPRA to get many more investigators. In light of the assumption that that the police commission and CPRA and the Office of Inspector General will be given far more work to do once the monitor is no longer on the scene. CPRA, especially with the new executive director coming on, really should at least double the number of investigators they have. They're supposed to have one investigator per 100 police positions, is my understanding. It's they're not near that now, and they need to really be beefed up. So beefing up the CPRA investigators is absolutely important, especially in light of the fact that the mayor is considering having all police misconduct investigations done by CPRA, not by the internal police division. And secondly, the Office for Inspector General is going to really have the burden of responsibility for doing the monitoring once the NSA is no longer in the picture. So the OIG really will have the lead, and will need, that's where staffing should go. CPRA investigators and the OIG. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bernstein. And Commissioner or Vice Chair Jordan, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to that. And, you know, that is feedback we've received previously. And, you know, we've considered those ideas. I think that from our perspective, and I'll, you know, also note that I'm on the budget ad hoc. So I've been part of a lot of these conversations. And, you know, we heard that feedback in the meeting in which we presented the preliminary budget. From our perspective, it is not an either or. I do understand there are limited resources, and I do understand that you know, a lot of departments are seeing cuts right now. That said, this is much like the argument we've seen around sort of, you know, the teacher strike, or, you know, budgeting and any number of other programs, or, you know, categories of you know, employment. Is just because one program is underfunded and needs resources doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, just because teachers aren't paid enough and, you know, EMTs aren't paid enough, for example, doesn't mean that, you know, neither of them should be paid. They should both be paid. They're both important. They're both valuable. You can't, saying that the IG's office or CPRA are vital and important doesn't mean that the commission does not have its own mandated responsibilities that need to be fulfilled. And we are struggling to fulfill those things, given the staffing and resources we have available to us. We can't do what we need to do to oversee both the CPRA, especially given the amount of responsibility they're about to take on potentially, and the OIG, if we don't have the resources available to us. We simply can't. That said, I do understand. And if you notice those budgets, they're getting significantly more budget-wise than the commission is, and that's reasonable. But we are simply asking for the bare minimum to accomplish the task that we feel like we need to get done to support and oversee those agencies. Thus far, we haven't. The commission has been incredibly reactive or reactionary sometimes in its approach to its responsibilities. And in the last couple of years, we've been trying to focus on internal structure and policy so that we can improve efficiency and actually, you know, set the groundwork for what comes later, as opposed to sort of casting around to the next thing that sort of demands our attention. And unfortunately, there's been no shortage of crises for us to address, from, you know, from Pollock to Kirkpatrick to Armstrong, to, you know, every single, to all of the different, you know, complaints that come out in the press. You know, we have to respond to all of those things, and we just don't have the resources to do those things without setting up some basis of solid footing for us to work from. And it's been challenging to accomplish that. As to CPRA and the upcoming responsibility, that's going to necessitate likely a charter change. And that's also probably going to necessitate a massive increase in budget for them. And so that in some ways is, a separate conversation. They're going to be getting additional funding. They're going to be getting additional staffing as we transition IAD into CPRA, or IAD's responsibilities into CPRA. That's not even a question. What that looks like is still remains to be seen, and we're sort of in the sort of preliminary conversations around how to accomplish that. The mayor's office is looking to assign a specific staff person to guide that process, and so we don't really know exactly how we're going to work through that, but rest assured, CPRA is going to be getting funding. But that, again, as I said, doesn't mean that we shouldn't be getting the staffing and resources that we need to accomplish the things that, we need to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And I appreciate that perspective of yes, and I just wanted to add that as we enter this kind of next phase in transition for the NSA, one thing that in my short time here I've seen as a major shortfall is the lack of continuity, and that adds so much to the stability and sustainability of the commission and its work. And so long as the burnout and then turnover rate stay as high as it has, we will continuously lose institutional knowledge. That it's a steep learning curve, and I think it's worth investing in retaining staff and gaining staff to be able to take on this work in a kind of shared way. And with that, I will take comments from Ms. Grenache.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm not sure who got burned out. That's not my impression, having followed the commission for several years. I think there are other reasons for the turnover in staffing. And I do not accept the analysis about both and, because in a budget, both and doesn't work. Because when you add something in one place, that means you're taking away something else from somewhere else. Your long range perspective post NSA doesn't accommodate the present. The present is that you are extremely short-staffed in CIPRA, even without additional complaints coming from IAD. Even with the current caseload, as you well know, the investigators are working weekends, and the interim director has been working on cases. So we're not talking long-term, we're talking immediate. And CIPRA needs immediate assistance. And you cannot just say, well, let's do that, and also let's increase the commission staff. It doesn't work budget-wise, and it's not going to happen. One will come at the cost of the other. So I want to reinforce what Elise Bernstein said. She got it right. The bulk of the work, both now and post-NSA, comes from CIPRA and OIG. The commission's role is to oversee those agencies and utilize the work of those agencies. That's the role of the commission. So the investment has to go into the people who actually produce the work, the data, the analysis that will allow the commission to function properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grenache. Next, we have phone number ending 1779.
This is Mary Vale, and I'd like to second the comments of Ms. Bernstein and Ms. Grenache. I am still offended. I think you should be embarrassed, given the other needs of the commission and oversight, and the way that the original budget proposal was submitted unilaterally by the chair in advance to the mayor's office. I'd love to see a public retraction of the proposal for the other two positions, particularly the information officer. I'm hoping to never hear again talk about, oh, getting out from under Warshaw, saving money, saving lawsuits, whatever. That's not going to happen until all the city defendants are in compliance and CPRA is ready to take over the additional workload. I was gratified by the choice of the new executive director, but there's a lot to be done. The staff issues that others have pointed out in terms of the investigators is key. Also, you should not be, burying your heads in the sand and thinking everything's good at CPRA. We just need a better director and more investigators. No. CPRA, on a smaller scale, but like internal affairs and OPD, and albeit for different, has a robust, disturbing, concerning record of failures in cases. The commission in the Armstrong situation never set them up to do an investigation. But before that, CPRA should be embarrassed that the way they handled the Pollock situation, the collusion with the department, not doing an investigation at all, which your predecessors realized they hadn't. So this is not just a deal about adding staff and shifting over resources. Also, I think organically that CPRA would benefit, and I'm happy to share my experience as NLRB attorney investigator with how intakes should work, how cases should be assigned, and more importantly, and this is something again, I don't ever expect to hear from the current chair that CPRA, in terms of dividing its investigative procedures and tightening them up, would learn anything from Warshaw, the monitor. But I really hope that the director will sit down with Warshaw and basically get a good grasp on the inherent problems other than the conflict of interest with the IAD investigations, because that's a roadmap for what CPRA, the proactive procedures that they should put in so that all of.
Thank you so much, Ms. Vale. Just in the interest of staying on schedule, I provided an additional minute, but please do submit any additional thoughts to us via email, opc@oaklandcommission.org. And I do want to address another question that came in regarding the accomplishments of the commission. And I am looking forward to publishing our recently approved annual report. And I think going through the annual report will be a great resource for looking at the accomplishments of this past year and previous years. For our annual reports can be found on the website as well. And so with that, let me share the. Alrighty. So thank you so much. Committee Chair Howell, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I'd like to thank our Chief of Staff's dedication and support in this work. Also, many thanks to all the members of the community who have shared feedback throughout this budget process. We look forward to incorporating your perspectives into our final recommendations. To the mayor and the city council, please send any additional thoughts you weren't able to express to opc@oaklandcommission.org by Monday, June 12th. Do any of our panelists today have anything to add?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I also want to thank Kelly for doing an excellent job of handling the logistics and facilitation of this meeting. Note that Kelly is also working on the weekend, and is kind of often doing these things after hours and on the weekends, which is notable given what we heard from the Coalition for Police Accountability representatives that we heard from in that last section. Thanks, Kelly. You're doing a great job.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, back to you, Kelly.
Alrighty, with that, I think that concludes our public forum. Thank you so much. And it's beautiful out, as Commissioner Ordaz mentioned, so please enjoy the weather, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thank you.